So, Tim, you show up at our place of employment like nothing happened, and then he said, I just got back from Iceland. How the hell does something like that happen?
Been planning it for a while, so just was going to go at the end of August. Timing didn't work out, and I went. I highly recommend it to anyone who's considering it. I know it's a hot destination these days, and no pun intended. But really had a fantastic time. Although, as we discussed, I did not watch any NFL football that week. It was not available, or I actually didn't really try that hard to see it. And what happens? The Giants win. And
that's right.
I just reminded myself that in 2013, when they also were winless at the start of the season, I took a trip to Canada, to Quebec, one weekend.
Same time zone, though.
Same time zone. I was able to watch that game, but they got their first victory. So I said to myself, I just need to go to Canada every weekend, and maybe they'll win. So
That's
I don't
true.
know if I have to go back to Iceland this weekend.
It's
so
like
they
the
can beat
slump
the Seahawks.
buster. Well, no, he's got to wait till they're 0 and maybe 0 is appropriate.
Yeah.
Do you use a travel agent or do you do this yourself?
I just did it myself. So.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went by yourself, not to bust any bubbles here. Just kidding.
But
that's kind of, I mean, you do it, but that's kind of worrisome, right? Sometimes.
No, you get used to things. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's a great place. As I said, it's a lot of fun, lots to see, lots to do, and yeah, I highly recommend it. And the Giants won, so there's that. I don't know how I felt about the Giants' victory, but they in fact won.
So what was kind of your preconceived notion of Iceland?
I don't know if I had one necessarily. I'd heard a lot of positive reviews from individuals who had gone recently. Like my friend's daughter had gone. She's in her mid-20s. I'd also heard people closer to my age and older who had visited and really liked it. You don't need a lot of time to really do what you need to do. You can pack that time pretty well. And I felt like I was gone longer than I really was, which is always a sign of a good vacation. Reykjavik, the city, I liked. Some people had suggested that maybe the city was a little too small and grows a little boring over time. I did not find that at all. That was not my experience. It was fun. It was lively. It was manageable. People are terrific. And you're at the doorstep of some natural wonders that you would otherwise not see.
Is that
in New
insane?
Jersey.
Just like walking out and there's these, I mean, it's almost like Game of Thrones, right?
Well, that's actually apparently where they filmed Game of Thrones, and they have like a Game
the wall.
of they have a Game of Thrones tour, which I didn't go on, but that's one of the advantages of going to a place like Iceland, which is you're in this quaint, charming city, and then 20 minutes later you're on horseback, and it's definitely worth going. So I recommend it. This was paid for by the Icelandic Tourism Division.
Oh, that's good. So how do you navigate a trip like that when you're by yourself? I mean, I would go on trips by myself when I was like in my early 20s, mid 20s, and people would think I was nuts. And I remember I went on one by myself to Seattle and Portland just because I was following the Nets, and I kind of liked being on my own, but that was like within the confines of our continental U.S.
Yeah, so the first time I ever traveled by myself was right after I graduated college. My gift to myself was actually going to Kenya.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's totally...
Yeah, so I went to Kenya for 2 weeks, and that was my first experience. And, well, I shouldn't say that was my first. I had traveled a little bit by myself a couple of years before then, but... you get used to it. I went to Peru a few years ago.
On your own?
On my own, and
that almost feels dicier.
I love Peru. We can do an entire podcast about Peru as well. It's just you get used to it, you like it, you enjoy it, and I think some people probably have more extroverted personalities where they engage those with whom they're interacting more so than I am. A little more introverted, so. But I'm happy. I'm happy with the solitude, and you enjoy it, and it's it's probably not for everybody, but I definitely enjoyed it. And as I said, Kenya, I was 21 by myself. but joined up with the tour group eventually. And like midway through, because you're spending so much time with these individuals, and they're from around the world, New Zealand, Australia, Italy, you do start to forge relationships. Actually, there was one gentleman whom I became friendly with. He was at the time, I guess, in his like late 40s, early 50s, and he was from Australia, and he had taken a buyout or retired and was traveling around the world for the year. So we met up, and I met him in Kenya, had a great time. He indicated that he was coming to the United States in December. I said, oh, yeah, just let me know. And lo and behold, he called me on a Sunday morning. I was like, oh, I'm coming to stay with you.
Oh, my God.
So, had to pick him up at the airport and stayed and showed him around. But that's the way it's done.
Was that an overnight flight to Iceland, or do you go in the morning?
You leave in the morning. You leave in the evening, and you arrive first thing in the morning.
So it's one of those deals like when you go to London where you don't go to bed. You just kind of roll into the day.
You do, and I flew WOW Airlines, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, it's sort of like their Southwest, but it was a lot of fun. They did a great job, and you just have to sort of power through, and then it's only 4 hours time difference, so you adjust relatively quickly. It's not terrible. It's better than if you were going to mainland Europe. So
when I would do that stuff, because I forgot, not only did I go on that trip, but I went to Florida. So I guess I did go on my own more. And there actually is a real positive aspect to it, because you just control your own schedule. You're pretty much always safe. And it's almost like liberating to just be in the middle of, relatively in the middle of nowhere, doing that. So are you like a planner? Do you roll into the city and know exactly what you're going to do, or do you just the first day just kind of bumble around? Again, other trips I've been on more of a schedule. So I like some structure to my day but I also like a certain amount of freedom that you can then decompress, and that's for the bodies.
Yeah, and just sort of figure it out. So, but again, I highly recommend.
Any weird foods that you had?
No. Actually, Icelandic hot dogs are something that they are quite proud of and promote. So they have their
What are they made out of?
They taste similar to our hot dogs, but I think the primary ingredient is lamb, more so than pork, so that does change the flavor, but they're everywhere. So
what did you see on the menus that was weird, even if you didn't have it?
Nothing really.
Whale
apparently,
things? Or?
Well, no, actually, apparently they do, I think, serve shark and puffin, but the locals don't eat it. It's really just a tourist trap. So the food is very similar to what we would eat here in the United States. So.
I remember I went to Italy on my honeymoon with my wife, and we went to one of these like 14th century former something or others, and it was now a bed and breakfast where you cook your own food and everything. And we were talking to the owner, and she said, "Oh, what do they eat in America for Italian?" I said, "Chicken Parmesan." She was like, "Chicken Parmesan? What is that?" And I told her what it was. She's like, "Oh my God, it's a chicken pizza. What the?" And then we're sitting there going, "Oh, what do you eat?" And they're like, "We eat like vegetables and fish." It's like you always think that there's these kind of like these stereotypes that they're eating what we're eating, but they're just eating normal things. I'd be like, "Well, we eat quinoa, chicken things most nights. It's not like we're sitting here having burgers and fajitas aren't." So what was the TV like? What is their what is their culture? It's very they take from a lot of like Nordic and British.
Definitely Nordic, and actually those are the two influences: Nordic and British, and television, BBC, and other British channels. I think they have at least one that I saw, Icelandic language station, but everyone speaks English. So
the show, there's not like shows you were coming across that are like an Icelandic sitcom, or
I didn't pay close enough attention to.
It's a small population too, like
about 300,000 people. Yeah.
And sports wise, do they what are they? It's just
soccer was the only sport. Football was the only sport that I heard referenced. I didn't hear skiing referenced or any other winter sports, but just primarily soccer. They're very proud of their victory over Britain last year.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Especially after the banks took them down, right?
But they, Yeah, people. It is interesting that I think they recognize the scale of their government, and it's almost sort of an inside joke how small it is. So you see their parliament, and you see the prime minister's home, and they're a fraction of the size of what you might expect in another nation. So, and it's also very accessible. There's very little security, limited police presence, and I imagine that they have little crime. So,
how about the coffee? What was that like? Because you're a coffee drinker every day, right?
I am, yeah. No Starbucks in Iceland and no McDonald's in Iceland. But they do have Dunkin' Donuts. It was okay. It was pretty good. They have a place, I'm going to probably mispronounce it. It is, I think the translation is tea and coffee. Mm-hmm. But whatever the Icelandic translation
was this like tea son and cough daughter?
And that was good. It was very good. But yeah, it's as I said, it's a great experience. I know a lot of people are going there right now, especially from where we live on the East Coast, because it's a pretty easy plane ride, and you can do a lot in a short period of time. And
Game of Thrones, I think, helps, and
it definitely helps, I believe. And
how about the hot springs? Interesting, right? That you got to do that, but you thought it was a little funny.
It was a little bit like a kabuki horror movie.
Was it like an ayahuasca retreat in warm water?
Well, it's almost like a bit like a James Bond film when you enter, because it's highly mechanized and advanced in terms of registration, and then it is like
sterility.
Almost, very sterile, almost dystopian. You have to shower before you enter the Blue Lagoon.
Someone actually showers you to ensure, right?
No, I don't know if anyone was observing me either. But and then you go in the evening, and it's dark, and you can't really see as you're in the Blue Lagoon. You don't really see people, but then suddenly they're upon you, and sometimes they are, and they're covered in mist and curtained in this gothic twilight.
What are you supposed to do when you go into them? You're just supposed to kind of rest, or are you supposed to walk, do what you want? Is there like a playground? Is like an adult playground where you can go into things?
Not really. It's just you just luxuriate in the experience of the Blue Lagoon.
Is there a time limit?
Not as far as I know.
It's that big that it can fit.
It could fit a good number of people.
And there's a lot of them?
There are.
Or is it like the main?
There are. I mean, they do. They I believe by reservation, it's by like the hour. So they try and limit the number.
Always got to be careful about hourly things, though. Mm-hmm. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I always say, like, if you see hourly hotel, if you look at your phone and clear browser cache, there's an option for the last hour. Anything hourly, you got to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
How far out of town do you have to go to
minutes.
get there? And so you had like is there Uber there, or do you just have a taxi or something?
No, they have a highly sophisticated bus system. So,
really?
Yes. So much like the rest of Europe, where they value public transportation. It is
what makes it sophisticated?
It's on time. Now you pay a premium for it because it's part of the tour packages. But it's on time. It is targeted to the individual, so they know who's on each bus and where you need to be at which time, and it moves
for public
this
transportation.
Public.
Okay,
No, then they do have public transportation as well, which, from my observations, also ran quite well.
Now, are you one of these travelers who's like morning until night? You're just gone, or do you like to come back to the hotels?
Depends.
Was this like a resort hotel or
no? It's a city hotel.
Hotel,
yeah, middle of the city.
Yeah. So. And dinner, that's always interesting to navigate. Although you don't really eat dinner.
No, yeah. I did fine. Yeah, there were no issues.
And like most of the food is just what we would have here, almost like
largely it is.
Burgers or
and I'd spent some time in England for a while, and very similar to what I would have there.
The thing I love with Iceland, and there's probably other countries, but this is where I read it, with the names. Everyone has the end of their name son or Dottir, and like it's literally like this person's daughter or this person's son. It's almost like Handmaid's Tale a little bit.
Interesting.
But so how about getting your sports fixed? You just cut off, or do you just check in?
I check online.
Does it always seem like weird things happen when you go away? and like you check and you're like, wait, what?
They
like,
do.
This would never happen when I was sitting at home.
So I remember going back to, this is more than 20 years ago, 22, when I studied abroad for a semester in college. And to show you where we were at that point in time, 1995, to date myself, my father would send to me the Star Ledger sports page. So he would wait a week, package them together, and then mail them to me. And that was like my sports fix. And then occasionally I would treat myself every Monday morning, or actually Tuesday morning, to a USA Today. So I could see who had won the previous day's NFL games. And again, to show you where we were at that point in time, if you bought it on Monday morning, they didn't have the 4 o'clock games. They only had the scores for the 1 o'clock game. So I actually then had to go by on Tuesday to get the evening, the afternoon games from the NFL. So, a different world.
And now with the internet, zero problems. You're just like, now do you even read news, or you're like, I don't want to any part of this?
No. Yeah, I didn't really.
Do you like shift to books?
Try to, as much as I can.
I never get books done. I'm always like, I always think when I'm going to go away that, it's going to be a 4-day vacation. I'll bring like 17 books, finish them, and then by the end of the trip, I maybe read a chapter of one of them. It's just such a pain.
Yeah, sometimes it depends upon where you're left. So, for example, on my Peru trip a few years ago, I did a hiking tour, which was kind of interesting because I told the tour guide in advance I had ruptured my Achilles a number of months beforehand, so I didn't necessarily know if I could do the Machu Picchu trek. So she heard that. It's like, fine, but I was like, well, I would like to do some type of hike. Could we program that? And she did, and it was a strange situation where I woke up in the morning at my hotel, and it was like 6 o'clock. I had to meet a gentleman who did not speak any English, and he put me in his car, and we drove for more than an hour, and it was completely isolated, and without any communication between him and anyone else, he just pulls over to the side of the road, and another gentleman jumps in the car, and he is my guide.
Oh my gosh.
And then we continue driving for about an hour, and we pull into what looks like someone's backyard. And we get out, and we just start hiking. And I'm speaking to my guide, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, what type of trail is this? He's like, oh, this is the second hardest one that we have in Peru. And I'm thinking to myself, I guess my travel agent didn't quite hear me when I said that I didn't know if I could manage a trek. But we did very well with it. We actually finished it in half the time. So we had allotted 6 hours. We did it in 3. And he didn't know what to do with me. He's like, okay, well, I'm just going to leave you where I was supposed to leave you, 3 hours from now, which is at the train station.
Oh my gosh.
And I tried to get on an earlier train, but they couldn't take me because the slots were taken. So I'm just at the train station for, at this point, like 4 hours with nothing to do. So that gave me the opportunity to read. So that was on the chance. I said, sit down. There's nothing else to do. Just sort of sit outside and read for 4 hours.
It's a crazy subject because I feel like current events kicks in immediately. You do current events, and then by the time you're done with that, there's never time left. It's a very hard thing I feel like books really get hurt by the current consumption because a lot of newspapers, magazines, they've pushed into the long form aspect of books. And I mean, if you look at a New Yorker or an Atlantic or an Economist or even the New York Times, but especially magazines, you'll see by the end of it, there's 125 pages that ends up being a book. And a lot of times you read and you don't even have the bandwidth left in you to read a book.
No, which is why, if you are a fan of certain authors, I think, at least for me, I try and build out the time knowing that individual's book's coming out. So Jennifer Egan, who had written A Visit from the Goon Squad, which won the Pulitzer Prize and I think the National Book Award too, just released her new book. So I brought that with me because that was, I'd known, I built in like, okay, that's
fiction is where it can win. I kind of feel like nonfiction is really hurt by great magazines because by the time you get the book, it almost feels old because magazines are sort of doing as good a job in the writing and keeping you somewhat current. And I feel like they get hurt. And then the longer you wait out on them, you've just accumulated. I have 40 Kindle books accumulated in my queue that I just go, when the heck am I ever going to read this? And I always fight in my head, should I maybe just cut off current events for a month and then just try to read books?
When anytime that I've had to recuperate from, say, an injury like my Achilles or my gallbladder or other. So that's when I find that I'm therefore limited. I can't do anything physically, so I just fill the time with being able to read. And then I think to myself, like, I should probably try and program my days according to these contours, but it never works.
Well, it's like whenever I'm sick, it's the only time I binge watch TV shows because I have the license to sit in a room away from everybody. I can't have it too loud because then Melanie gets mad that I'm doing that, but it's the only time I get anything done. Jury duty was the last time I finished a book because we were just sitting there all day, and it was like Stephen King's The Shining. It wasn't even something like that, but yeah, it's a hard thing, and you only subscribe to one outlet, right? Like, do you only subscribe to the New York Times?
I don't even subscribe to the New
York
Times.
Don't? You just get the articles?
Yes, yeah.
So you don't subscribe to anything?
I do not.
I think that's the key. But don't you, and we'll get to some other things, but this led to an interesting point. Don't you feel that subscribing is a good thing to do just so that those places at least get money? Or do you get the mental thing, which I get too, where it's like, if I'm not going to use it, then I don't want to pay for it, even if it's so cheap now?
That's true. Well, I get my father a subscription to The Economist, so when I visit him at his house is when I usually
you could take the digital
read through that. Yeah.
They have the audio edition where the English people read to you.
I, for whatever reason, perhaps for some that you touched on, I just don't don't subscribe, and I find that probably maybe limits what I take in. There's advantages and disadvantages to that, but it tends to work for me. And I find that like the major stories, I can find the angle that I want available to me whenever I want. So I'll buy the New York Times, the paper edition, but not every day. And now when I was commuting by train, I bought it every day. So I think I mentioned this to you a couple of weeks ago, interestingly, which is that when I'm commuting by train, I'm more up on current events because I'm reading on both going, and so I would read paper in the morning, a periodical on the way home. But when I'm commuting by car, I'm more up to date with current music because
but it's not even current. You listen to old stuff, right?
Yeah, but sometimes I'll well, not always. I'm trying to think. Spectrum on Sirius and Coffee House on Sirius. Occasionally a new artist will seep in. So the Head and the Heart, I never would have discovered the Head and the Heart if I were just commuting by train.
No, when I was commuting by train as opposed to driving, it was double the time, but I couldn't. I had so much time to read. I was actually reading books then. And now I'm really up to date on podcasts. I'm really up to date on audiobooks. Although I can't commit to an audiobook like for a whole week. I need to spruce it up. So I end up, I'm like listening to the Kobe Bryant, what the heck's the book? By Roland Lazenby or whatever, the guy who did the Jordan book. And I can't, it's interesting, but books feel so static now. That's part of the issue. That's why fiction's good. But don't you almost wish, because I want these places to get paid and have the sustenance to be able to create. I almost wish there was a way that if you click on an article to read it, and if there's some agreed upon threshold for which you've shown I've either finished it or I've passed the point where it's good, that like this is where Bitcoin would be good, because with actual money or digital money you can't do small increments, but where it would be like 0.05 cents is just taken from the Bitcoin.
Well, we're essentially going back to the serialization of the 19th century with authors like Charles Dickens, and who would publish his novels, but chapter by chapter in periodicals. And
isn't that? I mean, that's probably, that almost feels like it could come back around
possibly
to that. I mean,
especially with a lot of self-publishing that's going on right now. And he was paid by the word, which is also why he was so voluble. It is. Well, I will, if I am interested in a book, I'll just go on Amazon and they'll give you the first, say, 10 pages for free or an excerpt for free, just to sort of thumb through and see if I'm interested or hooked.
You're not a digital reader though, right?
I'm not, actually. I don't do well with digital reading.
Really? Even a Kindle?
Kindle, yeah. The screen. I actually like the tactile sensation of holding the book, and then I'd go back and forth a lot. So I actually find the pages to be better. I'm probably dating myself. I get a lot of my reading done on treadmills. So you can make the text bigger. You can, it's funny. Like I want to be in your position where I'm not subscribed to things, because I think once you subscribe, you're now on your own hook
to like make it worth it, and you want to finish every article. But I always, my point of demarcation is Harper's Magazine. Nobody talks about Harper's Magazine. It's not in the public discourse at all. But in many ways, it's just as good as the New Yorker or the Atlantic. But part of the reason no one talks about it is because it's behind a paywall, like everything. But they're also not as, I don't think they have as much money in the game as like a New Yorker. They haven't figured out that next stage the way they have. And every so often I'll feel like I'm in a good place. And then I'll see those, because they send those really good emails each week. They're writing, especially those finding sections, and then the little excerpts where they break what happened during the week and they have a subject and it's really witty. I'll go, oh, and then you'll see at the top of the email, like 2 years for $20. You're like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. And then I always fall behind the wayside on it, probably because no one's talking about it, no one's sharing it. It doesn't feel like it's, zeitgeisty. And so you fall back on it, and then it feels like it's hanging over you to finish. And then in the mail, the next one's there and the next one's there. And I think I want out of that. So I always pull out of that, and then you feel okay again. Mm-hmm. And then same thing with like Sports Illustrated, or like Sports Illustrated has gotten so meager because you could tell it's just surviving. Lee Jenkins writes like all 3 features in it, and good for him. He's doing a great job, but
they have improved their online content a lot.
They have, and they also did just come out with an app that really improved some terrible aspects that they had moved to after they were the partner at the beginning with the iPad, Time Magazine, and they actually were like, oh, it's going to change. Remember, it was like, oh, it's going to change magazine consumption, and it didn't. Mm-hmm. People just don't really want to pay for this stuff, unfortunately. But yeah, I got to get there. I got to read books. I got to read books, and I don't know how to get there. I need help.
Yeah, it is. It is tough. I mean, I have time on my hands, and I still don't get through as many.
You never really want to just sit and read either. Isn't that the hardest part? Like when you're in your normal routine.
Well, when you read for work too, when that's part of your job,
you can't. You almost need a ticker. The way we wear watches to tell us how many steps we had. Mm. We need tickers that tell us how many words we've read that day, because sometimes you get to the end of the day and you go, "It's the perfect time." I need my pitch count. This is the perfect time to read a book, and you're like, "I just don't want to." Mm-hmm. That's actually a good idea. Yeah. A word counter. Keep it on your eyes. Do that. Yeah. I got to find a way. 40 books. And then I'm subscribed to this bookbub.com, which sends you each day the best books that are discounted that day on any of the platforms. Maybe twice a week. Yeah, sure. $2. Jack McCollum's Dream Team book, or Smarter, Faster, Stronger. Like something always comes out and you go, oh, $1 or $2. I'll just do it. And then my accumulated mix. And then it hits me when I go in and look at my queue and I go, oh, there's that book I bought 3 years ago that's just sitting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, my bedstand does have, it starts to get a little crowded because I'm like, oh, I bought that and I'll read that next. They're just there. And then if you come back 3 months, the same books are there. So,
yeah, so I used to always be a nighttime, going to bed TV on with the sleep timer to take it off. Not a chance with Melanie. So I end up being like a reader with my screen, and then I fall asleep on my screen. And these iPads, they heat up things really badly. But you tend to read?
Well, I don't have a television in my room, so I not to reveal too much, but no, I don't have
Do you have a radio?
I don't have a radio either. I have an 8-track cassette player. No.
Do you have an Amazon Echo?
I don't have an Amazon Echo. No, I'm totally old school.
That's with the decomposing body in the basement.
Yes. So I just, and then I have my red room. No, I'm kidding. But no, it's just, so when I'm ready for bed, I'm usually,
you're out.
I read, and that usually sends me out.
Have I ever told you I wear a sleep mask?
You have, yes.
Yeah. That's a funny, because whenever I always want to fight the day. And so whenever I get up to bed, it could be even really late. And I'm just like, no, I gotta get more articles done. I have to get more stuff done. These magazines are hanging over me. And so without fail, if you do that, you're going to fall asleep in a position that you shouldn't. And that's often without the mask. So I just get berated in the middle of the night. Put your mask on. Oh. Then I fight it, and because you wear it and you're not going to make any noise, and you don't, and it's a lot of trouble. So what was it like being away for a weekend from the NFL?
Not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. I
Because I'm sure you went into it knowing I'm not even going to really pay attention.
I'm having mixed feelings about the Giants and their season. Maybe if they were in a different place, I would feel differently. So if they were 3-2,
well, they're now right in position that Kansas City Chiefs team was a couple of years ago. 10-game winning streak. Although that would have to be 11 now for that to happen.
So I didn't miss it. I liked my bye week. My personal bye week was okay. And coming back, you're able to follow the stats and the storylines pretty easily without seeing the action on the field. But
were you surprised when you saw the Giants won like that?
Yes and no. I mean, no, because that's just the way life works. When you don't expect them, when you think that something is spiraling out of control, and then it manages to stabilize itself. So
when you're not watching,
when you've seen enough things go right and wrong so quickly, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised, especially after the week they had with the distractions and with the losses they had the previous week. I just didn't know, but a point someone made, which is, not unlike when they lost Jeremy Shockey, that perhaps that personality on offense, just even removing a high-profile personality, perhaps that sort of brings some equilibrium to the huddle, and maybe that was what was on display. I mean, from what I understand, the offensive line played very well, that Ingram played well, that they, Darkwa ran well, and that they...
Defense got a touchdown. They
were able to spread the ball pretty well. So we'll see. I mean,
now, do you watch like the highlight of the game on your device or whatever?
This time I did not. No, sometimes I do. I did not.
Yeah, it was such a ho-hum game too. I mean, it wasn't even that big of a deal. I always feel like the way you say when you fall asleep or something, or you're not in a position to pay attention. For some reason, like the last 3 years, it's always the Golden State Warriors. With me, like I'll go to bed, and really on our time zone we can only watch the first quarter, and the way they play in the first quarter, you go, it's fine, I can go to bed, everything's fine. And then like the other night you turn it on and the Rockets won. You're just like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, I find that more with baseball than I do with basketball.
Oh, baseball's a war, because there's no rhyme or reason to a game when it changes.
Yeah, and you'll be like, what just happened in the 8th inning? So if I were a Houston fan,
so you went away when they were up 2-0, right? Houston was probably up 2-0 at that point?
No, they played Friday night and Saturday night, right? And then they had Sunday off, and then they played Monday.
Yeah, so it was probably...
Yeah, I was in the midst of...
so that must have been just as shocking as anything, that they're like on the doorstep here.
But we've seen that in the previous series with this team. That's just the way it's playing.
It's almost got that Diamondbacks World Series feel to it.
Yeah, where you have the two big pitchers, and then the Yankees are able to capitalize when...
Although it was Keuchel.
It was.
This time. Although I guess he could come in and play as a reliever. Although he doesn't... I never realized that he doesn't have hard stuff.
Yeah, and I guess, I know people are drawing comparisons between the Diamondback series, but also somewhat the 96 Braves series, where
2-0.
Yeah, and the bullpen, the depth of the Yankees in that case really carried them to victory. So we'll see.
This is very surprising.
It is surprising,
especially that they get knocked back to the point where you think, okay, this is it, down 3-0 in the play-in playoff game, down 2-0 in a best of 5, down 2-0 in a best of 7. They just keep making go, okay, this is it.
Well, look, I mean, with the youth that they have on their team, even if it ends in the ALCS at this point or in the World Series without them winning, it's valuable experience because they build resilience.
I said that with the Mets, though.
Oh, sorry.
I think sometimes there is the thing to that, but I also think it's so important in today's game and in all of today's games because there's just so much unpredictability and so much parity, except maybe in basketball. But you gotta maintain your run, and you gotta find a way to just
you have to win when you have the chance because you don't know when you're gonna.
I mean, they're pitching. I mean, CC is hanging on at 37. Tanaka came through, or he's actually come through a lot in this postseason.
Gray hasn't.
That's true, Sonny Gray. So it's almost not saying you have to capitalize, but you just got to keep it's all magic.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I think what happened with the team, I mean, I was against them re-signing Chapman, so I was wrong.
Well, not really. I mean, yes, he's been really good here,
but he
had a real problem
toward the end of the season.
And Betances kind of fell off from where he was. He's gotten kind of Jabba.
Yeah, I don't know. I know people are saying something's in his head, so it's not really mechanics, but it's more mental with him. I don't know. But it just seems that they assembled a team with a certain mixture and a certain ratio of youth and experience, perhaps not thinking all of it would coalesce at the right time, that you would have drop-offs in certain areas and that you would be carried maybe to more mediocrity.
Right.
But it just seems that all of those pieces have coalesced at the perfect moment so that you are getting what you need out of, say, Tanaka. 7 innings, you're getting, Chapman's pitching, he's locked down again. You're getting bats, even with their best players sort of cooling off early, but now hitting well again. And the veterans are coming up, veterans whom maybe you didn't expect much from are contributing. So just the pieces are just coming together at the right point.
What do you think now? I mean, we got a couple days where this will hang in there.
I think they'll win.
You do?
I think they'll win Friday night.
Yeah. It's funny, though, in baseball series, it's either that Houston has just completely had the mojo sapped, or we'll see whether home field advantage is a huge indicator here. Mm-hmm. But they don't really have a very good bullpen, I feel like, either. Don't. So it's like you're always they have kind of a feel of how Toronto felt the last couple of years. The Toronto, the Blue Jays, like where they can't take a punch almost. Like they can give the punches, but the minute they're punched back, we'll have to see the resilience. They got too much talent. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I've heard it said before that baseball is, while it is streaky in certain ways, it actually is the sport that you can count on the least momentum, just because of starting pitchers and bullpen. You don't know what you're going to get on that from pitching, and that could just change the complexion of a series in one game. So it's not over, certainly, and they've got to close it out. But I think they can win on Friday.
What do you think for football this week? I mean, we actually have we'll see how long. I mean, not a huge lasting thing here, but great Thursday night game with the Chiefs going into Oakland, and
I thought that would be a better game.
2-4.
Yeah, I mean, Oakland's playing actually more for survival than for supremacy.
They're completely playing, and I mean, it's crazy when you think of just some of the quick hitters, like the Buccaneers playing for their life going into Buffalo. Does their Buffalo old quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does he die in the winds like he did in that Jets game when they were 10-6
on the verge of the
playoffs? And I guess Jameis might play, but yeah, some real letdowns this season. I think that there's a couple of surprising 3-3s. I think Tennessee being 3-3. How about Arizona being 3-3? They feel like they're 0-6.
Well, remember, I do have them in the playoffs, so I'm surprised on the other end. I thought that they would be 4-2 or 5-1 at this point.
That must have been one of those surprises, being away that Aaron Rodgers is gone.
Yeah, you come back and
how about the Jaguars being 3-3? They've just been Jekyll and Hyde. They lose this game, they have the same record as the Colts. The Colts have, having 2 wins is pretty amazing.
Although Luck, didn't they just report he had a setback?
Yeah, a setback. Yeah, that's a tough one. The Rams, they could be for real, but they're like the records are funny this early because 4-2 doesn't feel as well as they've actually played. I think the Dolphins 3-2.
Well, I have the Dolphins at the playoffs. I feel vindicated.
But like the vibes of the national media feel so bad towards that situation, it's a shock.
Well, I did read some of the coverage of that game, and you would have thought that they had lost.
Yeah, and how about Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
Like what a bizarre. They were something weird going on. I mean, it's that little bit of hangover you get from that. We kind of were worried about that. And that first Chicago game, you go, okay, they got it out of their system, maybe, or it won't. It's crazy that the Ravens are 3-3 as well. You think the Cowboys will win in San Francisco?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
San Francisco's due though for a win. They've actually played pretty.
They have
decently.
played pretty well. I thought they would have won past couple of weeks, but I think Dallas will win.
How about Giants?
Ooh.
Seattle's 5.5 point favorite.
I think it's going to be Seattle.
Yeah, the Steelers haven't been as amazing as we think. How about the Chargers? 2-4, just pulling wins out. I mean,
they're still playing for Lynn, so good for them. And it's such a weird story what they're going through.
I know,
and it's just such a. It's more like, it feels more like the Saints after Katrina than it does any other expansion situation. That's where they're just on the road for every single game.
Yeah. How about the Saints 3-2?
Surprising.
They pulled it back, and then they play at Green Bay, which is very winnable now.
Mm-hmm.
They could be 4-2. The really good Sunday night game, Super Bowl rematch. We're going to see. Atlanta could be 3-3 after this week. The Patriots are going 4-2, and then we got our NFC East matchup on Monday night with
Philadelphia
Redskins going into the Eagles, who I still can't believe are good.
I can't believe that. Actually, I had the Redskins performing better than the Eagles. I mean, I thought the Eagles would be decent. I didn't have them at, say, 4-12.
Yeah.
I actually had them, I think, at 7-9.
It could be almost like the Cowboys last year, where you just get this momentum and it's not making a ton of sense.
You know?
I mean, it just feels strange. It does feel like the Redskins will win this game, though.
I feel that way as well.
I don't know why. How about the first couple of days of the NBA?
It's been a lot of fun. I just feel like it's palpable in the arenas when you're watching. Yeah. Everyone was just so happy to have it back. Not that it was gone for that long, because I feel like the NBA was on everyone's radar.
Super hyped.
Yeah. But a lot of fun. I watched a good portion of the Washington-Philadelphia game last night, and that arena, you would have thought it was a playoff game.
That's right.
And I think everyone's just excited to see. And, it was in D.C., but a lot of Philadelphia fans either living there, I don't know if they made the trip, but it's
like a fire hose once the season starts. That's the only problem. You don't know where to look.
It does. It used to be my favorite night of the year was the opening night, and going back more than 20 years for opening night, I think they, like, all but two teams would play on the same night, and usually open on a Friday, I think first Friday in November. Could be wrong about that, but
it feels preseason-ish right now still because of that.
It does. Well, yeah, the early start. I think everyone was interested to see where the various free agents and traded players, how they look. A few rookies that are interesting, exciting, and I have I want to see De'Aaron Fox play. I want to see
Alonzo tonight.
Yeah, he's on tonight, which will be interesting. But the Boston injury that took the air out of that first game.
That was such a brutal injury. That was like Game of Thrones, like when Ned Stark had his head chopped off at the end of season 1, the main character. And it's like, you watch TV and you go, oh, there's conventions. They're not going to allow certain. Okay, they're going to allow that to happen. Mm-hmm. It had the feel where it was like, okay, this team's ready to go. Oh my dear God. There was a whole lot of, almost felt karmic in its awfulness. I mean, and I actually, hitting on them, there's two things off of that game. One, leading into the next back-to-back night, I think Boston's not going to be very elite this year. I look at that roster, and the guys played well. The young guys played well in Hayward's stead being out. But to rely on that level of young player coming through, to rely on Kyrie to be an absolute number one night after night after night, I think that I think they're going to actually have some trouble getting even to 50 wins. It might be like a 45, could be 500. I mean, it's asking too much from Tatum and Brown.
They'd given up so much of their depth and their identity from last season.
Right. You can't look to last year and say, oh, yeah, they have
what it takes, because they don't have Bradley. They don't have Olenek. They don't have
Avery Bradley.
Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley, Olenek. They don't have Crowder. So they've lost a lot of their depth and identity, which we've had this conversation before, but I don't blame them in some ways, because that composition was not going to beat the Cavaliers and was not going to win in the NBA Finals.
Right.
But it would withstand the situation that they're in right now, which is their second best player is out. Then everyone steps up, and they probably could absorb it, but they took the chance that that system was not going to get them where they needed to go. So therefore, we're going to bring in higher caliber players. But when one of them goes out, the balance is off. So
it's funny. I did a podcast, sorry, when you were away. I ended up being with Greg Harinya.
Well, you're thinking of me at least.
Yeah, we talked about you. We said,
okay.
No Tim here. But I had kind of compared Isaiah Thomas to Tim Tebow in that he creates this just buzz because there's almost something mythological about him and his ability to deliver in big moments. Much better shooting form than Tim has throwing. But Tim did win a playoff game and took them down the stretch of that season. And in some ways, people would look and go, are you sure you want to rip that up? And they ripped it up because of the glory of getting
Peyton
the
Manning.
once-in-a-lifetime quarterback. And I think Kyrie's not Peyton Manning, but there's some aspects where it's the replacement that rips it up and you hope it takes you to the next level. I think almost any other quarterback, there would have been some unsureness about if that could happen because Peyton could just overtake things. Although he also had the injury, that terrible injury that missed the season. Mm. But I just don't think they're going to be scrappy. They've almost gone, and I don't even know with the Hayward addition being there if they were really going to be like a 56-win team. Hayward's unbelievably good, but even in Utah, how many times were we sitting down watching Gordon Hayward? Like, let's be honest, we're all guessers on what his effect and impact was, versus him being in the mix with a lot of other really good players. It wasn't like he was, torsos and shoulders above the rest of them.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Celtics should have gotten Paul George first. I mean, I think that probably was their number one target.
Which is amazing, injury-wise.
Yeah.
That it's sort of that.
Similar. How devastating. But, yeah, I was not as sold on, I think we even said this, which is with the additions they made, they probably lose to Cleveland in 6 as opposed to 5 in the finals. And now they look a lot more like Washington, Toronto, Milwaukee. There's more parity now in the middle of the East.
It's funny you actually say that. So you said Washington, Milwaukee, and
Toronto.
I take Washington over the Celtics in terms of if you have the team as a general manager. I take them. I mean, I'm not coach out of the mix. I take them because they have the two guys in the backcourt who are both of size.
They do.
I think you have to.
Don't have a lot
they
of
almost
depth.
beat them last year.
Don't have a lot of depth, though.
But I don't know if the Celtics do at this point either. It's a lot of young depth. It's a lot of
Horford. You have
talk about a guy
Marcus
who just
Smart.
sort of fell into the back. I know, but I still think I take their roster. Toronto, I just don't love the backcourt enough to take them over. I think Kyrie's ceiling and his youth make a huge difference there. You think of DeRozan as almost like 36, even though he's still in his late 20s. He might be 29. Milwaukee, I certainly don't. Especially with what we saw Antetokounmpo did to them on their first home game.
37 points.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of difficult. I think they're going to be in for some trouble. Secondly, from that first game, I think a lot of people were coming out of the Cavs game going, they're good, they're fine. And yes, they're fine because much like Barack Obama covered the ills of much of the Democratic Party, LeBron James covers pretty much any roster. You stick him on any roster and everyone's going, wow, the sun is really shining. But I looked at that game and I said, man, they had to bust their ass to beat what turned into a scrappy Boston Celtics team on their home court, Cleveland. I don't think Rose is out for anyone but himself. That's not the best look in your point guard, who's supposed to be a ball-dominant pass-first point guard. Dwayne Wade is Dwayne Wade, but game 1 and game 52, he did not exactly look amazingly young. I think he can burst. Isaiah Thomas, we'll see. I mean, I think he'll end up being like a mid-season pickup where
Crowder played well.
No, he certainly played well, but
and he fits with what they needed.
Absolutely, but they certainly Can't you see the same exact thing happening in a series against Golden State, the first 2 games, where everybody who brought in was just buzzsawed and old? This is worse. This is like a lot of Darren Williams on the court. Derrick Rose, I can't wait to see them play Golden State this year with this roster, because
Jeff Green.
He actually had some moments.
He did. I'm a Jeff Green fan for some reason.
Yeah, but Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose playing Golden State, that's really scary. I mean, everyone's scary, but
yeah, it's tough to keep up with them on the perimeter. That's why Crowder's so important.
Do you think Kyrie still feels good about his decision? It's almost like one of those decisions where you go like, man, I wish I could kind of, especially when we saw them with the handshakes at the end of the game.
There are too many variables for him. Was LeBron James going to come back? What was the future in Cleveland going to look like? Probably too many variables. He probably is satisfied that he knows at least what the next 4 to 5 years of the future will look like.
That's true. Even though he's got one more.
He's got one more.
We got to see if he. We got to see if he resigns. Yeah, and I think
Houston. I mentioned this to you. They played 8 players that first game. That's like national championship game in college rotation that he shortened the rotation for game 1. Usually you lengthen your rotation for game 1 because you're still trying to try things out. But that's what he did. Now, last night they played 9 players because
one
Chris
of
Paul
whom
was out.
Chris Paul.
Yes, because Chris
That's
Paul
a little worrisome. This is feeling a little Adrian Peterson Saints right now. Although then he went to Arizona and was like a monster, juking people out. Did you see those highlights?
I did.
At all? Yeah, that was unbelievable. That was like Fountain of Youth, like when basketball players used to go to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then they all turned into like these weird anti-gravity monsters.
Well, speaking of Phoenix, I don't know what happened to them last night. They lost by close to 50.
They're in bad shape. Yeah, I think Houston is in spite of Chris Paul. I don't know if Chris Paul, I don't know what he adds there.
I think he adds something. I mean, I think I said this earlier, which is I think a year and a half from now, maybe even more, like less than that, we're going to be talking about the Chris Paul trade to Atlanta, that they may have to break this up. That's not necessarily going to work. They're going to find out soon if it works or not. People are higher on them than I am. I don't know how it's going to mesh all that well.
I was not interested. I was interested only in that game and seeing Golden State. And they did what they needed to do while I was watching, which is most important to me. But I'm not interested in watching Houston. It's weird. Like, I guess you can only speak for what you feel. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in watching the Houston Rockets.
I'm more interested in watching Oklahoma City.
I was going to say, I'm very interested in seeing Oklahoma City. Like, unbelievably interested. But the Rockets play a game that's not amazingly different than Golden State, and I love watching Golden State. I don't know what it is about Houston. I don't just want to put the game on.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, sadly, last night, because I said to myself, all right, the Nets have gotten to a point where it's not an embarrassment to watch. Like when you only have so much time, free time to watch stuff,
the
you don't want to spend
Jordan Farmar days.
Oh God, you don't want to be watching that. Or even like the last couple of years was just really bad. I would see people tweeting about watching the Nets or talking about like Dinwiddie or something. Like, who the hell are these people? But last night I said, look, I'm going to put this on. I want to watch it. I'll see them play Indiana. Indiana's not supposed to be very good. And it turned into a freaking ABA game. But I had DVR'd it because I have to put my son to bed. And those Indiana games are tough, that 7 o'clock start. You barely get into your night, and it's already like the end of the second quarter. But I was watching it, even with the ability to fast forward through everything. I wasn't entranced or hooked into this in any way. And they played pretty well. I mean, again, it was like a high-scoring game. They lost Lynn, but I don't even know if that amazingly matters to me. I just wasn't that... It wasn't like I was dying to see the next game. Like, I don't know if I'm back in on watching them. Watching D'Angelo Russell was nice, but I don't think he's transcendent. Like, he's not making other players better. He's not... I almost want him to... I don't like the haircut that he's doing now. Him and Derrick Rose both have that haircut. I like when he had the nice crop top. Just looked like more in line. I don't know. I couldn't watch him.
I actually didn't watch any of the Nets game. I forgot that they were on. So,
but would you want to?
I'd watch I would like to watch a little bit, probably at the beginning of the season. Beginning and end, I think. My prediction is that there'll be some, the Nets are competitive articles written in late November. Then I think they're going to swoon and then bounce back toward the end of the season to finish with like 28 wins.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't that interested. I'm more interested in watching the Nets than I am the Knicks. I'll say that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Except tonight against Oklahoma City, but yeah,
which is a weird game to open your season.
Well,
Nick.
like we said, that and Boston start. I mean, it makes sense why Boston was starting there because of the rematch, but makes zero sense
for the Knicks to be in Oklahoma City.
And then it's funny because Golden State had that home game, and then they roll right into like a little swing through. Is it New Orleans or Memphis or Dallas, Houston? Like not Houston, I don't know, but like they have a 3-game road trip or something that comes up right after that. But I wasn't amazingly into it.
Yeah, about New Orleans, by the way. I did look at that. I didn't see the game, but I saw the box score, and I said this to you this morning. That box score, I think, tells the story of the Pelicans for this entire season, which is you had Davis and Cousins with monster lines, and everyone else contributed very little.
So I compared last year or in the summer or something. That configuration reminds me of the Yankees. God, it was only last year the Yankees stunk when they had both Chapman and Miller, and you're saying to yourself, boy, that's weird. And Betances, obviously, at that point. But it felt like a concentration in one area to the point where you can't even fill out importance on the roster and the rest of it. This is really stark. If you think of these guys, like last year, Miller goes to Cleveland, Chapman goes to the Cubs. They end up actually facing each other in the World Series. We'll end on this. New Orleans. Where do you send Anthony Davis, and where do you send DeMarcus Cousins, where they're going to make the biggest impact and to turn a team into something that actually raises up two teams? I know where Boogie's going in my mind.
San Antonio. That's where I have him.
Washington.
Oh, yeah, that would do it.
I mean, they can't get rid of their two guys. That's the only problem.
They can't give up one of the other.
I mean, they didn't really have to. That's the hard part with basketball is that in baseball, you can get those kind of players and give up farmhands. Like basketball doesn't have it. So I'm almost saying, like, if you didn't have to get rid of one of your main guys.
Yeah, I would say San Antonio.
Yeah. Even next to LaMarcus, you see they gave him an extension.
Yeah, and he played pretty well last
Big extension. I think that was a psychological extension. And I think that was actually, I think they saw in the open market that he's more tradable with more years.
He looked more like the Portland Aldridge. Yeah, I would say I would send him to San Antonio. I think Popovich would get the most out of him. And for Davis, Boston
or Phoenix or something.
Well, Boston, I think, just because he would. Phoenix, I don't know what's going on in Phoenix, unfortunately. Really don't know. I mean, I know they're counting on Bender and they're counting on Jackson a lot, but they didn't. I didn't see them, but
one of those, or Portland would be fun. I mean, and Nurkic, right? No, who's?
I get confused between Denver and
Jokic and yeah, the one that went to Portland, the itch that went to Portland. He almost made himself tradable, but yeah, it feels like that. I'm sorry for New Orleans. It sort of feels like that has to be broken up for all sides. They're not going to figure this out with Anthony Davis here.
Yeah, and I think Alvin Gentry, unfortunately, will be the first coach let go.
Does he get back on the bench in
as a head coach? Oh, Oakland? Yeah, I think so.
Where's Mike Brown go?
Mike Brown got a huge ovation last night when they gave out the rings.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, or no, not last night. The night before.
2 nights ago.
2 nights ago, got a huge ovation, which was nice to see.
Yeah. Well, this was a good long one. Hodgepodge. We get an ovation here.
Great. Thank you very much, man.
We'll talk later.